What happens to the BRICS grouping? Will it bring countries closer, or each one is going to try and sort of, look for their own way on this? I mean, President Trump, of course, has berated the BRICS grouping, attempts at a common currency, etc., in the past year.
Well, first of all, don't take whatever President Trump says as if it is the truth. On many occasions, it is not truth. Whether it is falsehood or not, you can make up your own mind. Secondly, on issues like this, you need to be very philosophical. I think BRICS is an organization for the future. It is based on consensus. It is based on cooperation. Whereas whatever President Trump and his government is doing is using unilateralism to put pressure, maximum pressure on others. Now, talking about the use of force in itself is a neutral term. You can use of force for constructive purposes, positive purposes, or you can use force to launch aggression, violation of other countries' sovereignty. So we need to be very careful as to what exactly President Trump and his government are using the mighty US military force for. It is not for positive purposes. It is for destructive purposes. In that sense, it may give more incentive to organizations like BRICS and all the other peace-loving countries to make up great resolve to fight off against such maximum bullying. Because otherwise, you just succumb to such maximum bullying. You become a slavish kind of a servant of this domineering hegemon in the world. That will not make your life better. It will make the whole world even more miserable. If one country can dominate above all the other countries, plundering your assets, using your oil and gas reserves for its own purpose rather than for your legitimate purpose. Personally, I do not want to see this strategy, either Donald Trump doctrine to replace the Monroe Doctrine, will succeed at all. I think eventually it will backlash very heavily against the American people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. American people, of course, also will have a say on some of it. I don't know how much of the midterm elections will be influenced by foreign policy. I mean, politics rarely is. Of course, Greenland is, we'll see what happens. But the big one, of course, is going to be Iran. I think they've already said they're locked and loaded. I think it was the term which was used if there is a harsher crackdown on protests in Iran. You think it'll come to that in 2026?
Well, it's a possibility that can't be ruled out. I mean, I would hope it doesn't come to that, and that we are able to see the US draw back from reliance on military force after the Venezuelan action. But what we've seen of President Trump is that he is relying to a considerable extent on the use of military force, or on the use of economic coercion to wield US power and influence. And many of the softer instruments which enable the wielding of influence in a less grating or a less controversial manner have actually been dismantled, whether it is US aid, whether it is contribution to UN programs, which were available for development, environmental issues, etc., democracy promotion around the world from the UN. I think the US has pulled back from the softer instruments which enabled its diplomacy to wield influence, and is relying increasingly just on the use of military power, which is useful in a, can be useful in certain situations if it can be used surgically. But quite often we've seen that that doesn't happen. And eventually there's a prolonged entanglement, if you will, to use MAGA terminology, a foreign entanglement. And if you look at President Trump's own agenda, actually, he came to power basically wanting to restrict the US's global role and concentrate on his own backyard. But we've seen action elsewhere as well, in Nigeria, in Iran, all oil-rich countries. And we don't know whether he will actually adhere to the mandate that he was given, and which was part of his agenda, that he should focus on rebuilding America's own economic strength, which has been squandered in military entanglements abroad. So, in a sense, the actions he's taking run completely counter to his own pronounced agenda in many cases. The question is, if actually there is, the US gets sucked in to governance and stabilization in Venezuela, then you could see his own constituency turn against him.